The phone call came at 2 a.m. Dr. Gordon Atkinson's voice was steady, professional, trained over decades to deliver the worst news with clinical precision. But Freddie Mercury, sitting alone in his Kensington mansion surrounded by his beloved cats, heard what the doctor wasn't saying. He'd heard it in every careful pause, every measured word, every breath the man took before speaking. "Mr. Mercury, the test results have come back. I think you should come in tomorrow morning, early, and please, bring someone with you." Freddie hung up the phone. His hands weren't shaking yet. That would come later. He lit a cigarette, Marlboro Red, his favorite, poured himself a vodka, neat, and walked to the tall windows overlooking his private garden. The London night was quiet, peaceful, indifferent. It was April 1987. Freddie Mercury was 40 years old. He'd sold out Wembley Stadium twice. He'd sung to 250,000 people at Rock in Rio. He'd created Bohemian Rhapsody, and We Are the Champions, and Somebody to Love. His voice had moved millions. His presence had defined a generation. And in that moment, standing at the window with vodka in hand and smoke curling toward the ceiling, he already knew what the doctor would say tomorrow. He already knew he was dying. The next morning, Freddie Mercury walked into Dr. Atkinson's Harley Street office alone. He'd told Jim Hutton, his partner of 7 years, that it was just a routine checkup. "Nothing to worry about, darling." He'd told Mary Austin, the woman he'd called the love of his life, absolutely nothing. Some truths Freddie had learned. You had to face in absolute silence before you could share them with anyone else. Dr. Atkinson didn't waste time with pleasantries. Freddie appreciated that. He'd always hated people who circled around difficult subjects like vultures, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Mr. Mercury, I'm afraid the test is positive. You're HIV positive, and given the symptoms you've described, the night sweats, the weight loss, the persistent infections, it's likely the virus has already progressed to AIDS." Freddie nodded slowly. He'd suspected this for months, maybe longer. The signs had been there, the exhaustion that no amount of rest could cure, the fevers that came in waves, the way his clothes had started hanging off his frame, the purple lesions he'd noticed appearing on his skin like dark flowers blooming in all the wrong places. But there's a difference between suspecting death and knowing it, between wondering and certainty, between maybe and absolutely. "How long?" Freddie asked, his voice steady, always steady. Even now, Dr. Atkinson shifted in his chair. "That's difficult to say. Every patient is different. It could be several years. Some patients live for—" "How long?" Freddie repeated, his eyes sharp despite the exhaustion written into his face. The doctor met his gaze. "Realistically, with the progression we're seeing, 2 to 3 years, maybe less." Freddie Mercury was 40 years old. He had maybe 1,000 days left on Earth. Maybe fewer. The mathematics of death were suddenly very simple. "Don't tell anyone," Freddie said, standing to leave. His legs felt steady beneath him. That was good. He'd need that steadiness for what was coming. "Mr. Mercury, you'll need support. You'll need people who—" "Nobody. I mean it, doctor. Not a word. Patient confidentiality. You understand?" Dr. Atkinson nodded slowly. He'd seen this before. Denial, maybe, or perhaps something else, something he couldn't quite name. But what the good doctor didn't understand, what almost nobody would understand, was that Freddie had already made his decision. He would fight this disease the only way he knew how, not with protests or public statements or tearful confessions, not by becoming a poster child or a cautionary tale or an object of pity. He would fight it by creating, by making music, by refusing to let his death become more important than his life. But first he had to lie to everyone he loved. For 4 years, 1,460 days give or take, Freddie Mercury carried his death sentence in silence. He lied to Queen. When Roger Taylor asked why he'd lost so much weight, Freddie blamed it on a new diet. When Brian May noticed the tremor in his hands during recording sessions, Freddie laughed it off as too much coffee. When John Deacon, the quiet one, simply stared at him with knowing, worried eyes, Freddie changed the subject and suggested they order lunch. He lied to the press. When tabloid reporters printed rumors about his health, and they printed many, Freddie called them garbage, lies, homophobic nonsense from people who had nothing better to do than destroy lives for entertainment and profit. He lied to his friends. Party invitations were declined with convenient excuses. Social events were avoided. The vibrant, extravagant Freddie Mercury, who'd once thrown parties that lasted for days, began staying home more and more, surrounded by his cats and his art and his slowly shrinking world. Only a handful of people knew the truth. Jim Hutton, because you can't hide death from someone who shares your bed and sees you at your weakest. Mary Austin, because Freddie had never been able to hide anything from Mary. Not his sexuality, not his fears, not his approaching end. His personal doctor. A few trusted staff members who signed NDAs and swore on their lives to keep the secret. But why? The world would later ask. Why the secrecy? Why not go public? Why not use his massive platform to raise awareness, to educate people, to fight the stigma? The answer, when you really understand it, is absolutely heartbreaking. Freddie watched what happened to other celebrities with AIDS. He watched Rock Hudson, the epitome of American masculinity, become a cautionary tale. His legacy reduced to whispered jokes and uncomfortable silences. He watched Liberace get mocked even in death. His entire career dismissed as the tragic story of a closeted man who died of a shameful disease. He watched so many friends disappear from public life, their names struck from guest lists, their accomplishments forgotten, their entire existence reduced to 3 letters, AIDS. The disease wasn't just killing people, it was erasing them, turning complex, brilliant, flawed human beings into one-dimensional victims, AIDS sufferers. Cautionary tales, warnings about the wages of sin. Freddie refused. "I won't be remembered as someone who died of AIDS," he told Mary one night in 1989. They were sitting in his conservatory, surrounded by his collection of Japanese art. Tears were streaming down his face, a rare sight. Freddie almost never cried. "I'll be remembered as someone who made music, someone who performed, someone who lived. That's all. Just the music and the living, not the dying." Mary held his hand. She didn't argue. She understood. She'd always understood. But keeping the secret was torture. During the recording of the Miracle album in 1989, Freddie could barely stand for more than 20 minutes at a time. His vision was blurring from retinal damage caused by cytomegalovirus. His vocal range, once spanning nearly 4 octaves, was shrinking as his lungs grew weaker. Simple tasks, walking from the control room to the vocal booth, climbing stairs, holding a pen, became exhausting challenges. But he showed up to every session, smiled at every question, laughed off every concern, and sang like his life depended on it. Because it did. The music was all he had left. The music was his legacy. The music was the evidence that he'd been here, that he'd mattered, that his life had meant something beyond the manner of his death. Brian May would later recall those sessions with a mixture of admiration and anguish. "We knew something was terribly wrong. We just didn't know how wrong. How could we?" Freddie was so good at hiding it. He'd disappear between takes, and we'd hear him coughing in the bathroom, these terrible, racking coughs that went on and on. But when he came back out, he'd smile and say, "Right, darlings, where were we?" and just carry on as if nothing had happened. Roger Taylor remembered the denial, the willful blindness. "We didn't want to know. Does that make sense?" We could see him wasting away. We could see the lesions he tried to hide under makeup and long sleeves. But if we acknowledged it, if we said it out loud, then it became real, and none of us wanted it to be real. The truth nobody talks about is this: Freddie was dying, and he was doing it completely alone, even surrounded by the people who loved him most. The confession came in late 1989, in Freddie's living room at Garden Lodge. He'd called a meeting. Roger Taylor, Brian May, and John Deacon arrived expecting to discuss plans for the next album, maybe argue about song selections, share a drink or two. Instead, they found Freddie sitting in his favorite chair, surrounded by his cats, Delilah on his lap, Goliath and Lily at his feet, looking smaller than any of them had ever seen him. "I need to tell you something," Freddie said. His voice was steady. It was always steady, even now. "I have AIDS. I've had it for a while now. 2 years, maybe more, and I'm not going to make it. The doctors have been very clear about that. But before I go, before this disease takes whatever time I have left, I want to make one more album. One last album. With you." The room went completely silent. You could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, the soft breathing of the cats, the distant sound of London traffic outside the windows, and 3 grown men trying very hard not to fall apart. Roger broke first. He always broke first. Tears poured down his face, and he didn't bother hiding them. Brian couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. Every word he wanted to say, every reassurance, every promise, every desperate plea, died before it could reach his lips. John Deacon just stared at his hands, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might shatter. "How long have you known?" Brian finally managed to ask. "Long enough," Freddie said. Then, seeing their faces, seeing the pain and grief and guilt written there, he softened. "Look, darlings, I don't want your pity. I've made my peace with this. I don't want you treating me like I'm made of glass, like I'm already a ghost. I don't want sad faces and careful words and all that nonsense. I want to do what we've always done. I want to make music. That's all I've ever wanted, really. To make something beautiful. So let's do it. Let's make something they'll remember long after I'm gone." That album became Innuendo, released in February 19, and Freddie Mercury poured everything into those recordings. Every ounce of remaining strength, every moment of fear and rage and defiance, every scream against the dying of the light. The title track opens with an explosive flamenco-influenced guitar riff that sounds like Freddie declaring war on death itself. Listen to it now. Really listen. That's not just music. That's a man refusing to surrender. "I'm going slightly mad" was Freddie's dark joke about his deteriorating mental state as the disease progressed. The music video shows him in black and white, gaunt and ethereal, wearing a wig that barely hides how much hair he's lost. It's a horror show disguised as whimsy. It's Freddie showing the world his death without actually saying the words. And then there's "The Show Must Go On." Brian wrote it in a burst of raw emotion, channeling everything he couldn't say directly to his friend into music. The song demanded everything a vocalist could give: soaring highs, powerful lows, sustained notes that required lungs of steel. When he played the demo for Freddie, he immediately regretted it. "I can't sing this, Brian," Freddie said quietly. They were at Freddie's house. It was October 19th. Freddie had maybe weeks left, maybe days. "Listen to the range. Listen to what it requires. I can barely talk anymore." Brian felt his heart break. "We don't have to record it. I shouldn't have." "No." Freddie's voice was firm, definitive. "We record it. All of it. Every note. Freddie, bring me a vodka. I'll do it." What happened next would become legend. Freddie Mercury, dying, barely able to stand without support, his body ravaged by AIDS and pneumonia, and a dozen opportunistic infections, walked into that recording booth and sang. He didn't just sing, he soared, he commanded. He found something inside himself that the disease hadn't touched, couldn't touch, would never touch, no matter how much of his body it destroyed. His voice climbed and held and conquered every impossible note. In the control room, Brian May turned away, tears streaming down his face. Roger Taylor covered his eyes with his hands. John Deacon stood frozen, unable to move, unable to process what he was witnessing. They were watching a miracle, and they were watching a goodbye. Freddie sang take after take after take, not because the performance wasn't good enough, it was extraordinary, but because he knew. He knew this might be his last vocal recording ever. His final statement, his last chance to tell the world, "I was here, I mattered, and I never gave up. Not once, not ever." By November 1991, Freddie's body was shutting down. The AIDS had progressed to full-blown complications. Pneumonia filled his lungs. Infections ravaged his skin. His liver and kidneys were failing. Pain was his constant companion, his shadow, his only reliable friend. The doctors wanted him in hospital. Freddie refused. "I want to be home," he told Jim Hutton. "With my cats, with my paintings, with my music. I'm not dying in some sterile room with fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant. If I'm going to die, I'm going to do it surrounded by beautiful things." So they brought the hospital to him. Round-the-clock nurses, IV drips, morphine administered on a schedule so precise it felt like a countdown. His bedroom in Garden Lodge, once a sanctuary of silk sheets and extravagant decor, became a hospice. On November 22nd, Freddie's closest friends visited for what everyone knew would be the last time. Brian arrived first. He stood in the doorway of Freddie's bedroom, unable to move forward. The man in the bed, thin as a skeleton, skin like paper, eyes sunken but still somehow bright, was barely recognizable as the friend he'd known for 20 years. "Stop staring, darling," Freddie said, his voice a whisper. "I know I look terrible. Come here." Brian sat beside the bed and held Freddie's hand. It felt like holding a bird, all hollow bones and fragile warmth. "Thank you," Brian said. The words felt inadequate, pathetic, but they were all he had. For everything, for the music, for the friendship, for showing us what courage looks like. Freddie smiled weakly. "Oh, stop it, you'll make me cry, and I don't have the energy for that." Roger came next. Loud, emotional Roger, who'd never learned to hide his feelings. He took one look at Freddie and broke down completely. Sobbed, couldn't stop sobbing. "I'm sorry," Roger kept saying. "I'm so sorry." "For what, darling?" Freddie asked. "For not—" "Oh, Roger." Freddie squeezed his hand as hard as his failing muscles would allow. "You already saved me. Every day, every song, every moment we made something beautiful together. That's salvation. That's immortality. Don't you see?" John Deacon came last. Silent John. He didn't cry. He just sat beside the bed, held Freddie's hand and nodded. A single nod that somehow contained everything. Gratitude, grief, love, goodbye. Mary Austin stayed for 3 days straight, sleeping in a chair beside Freddie's bed, waking every time he stirred. She fed him when he could eat, held water to his lips when he couldn't, read to him from his favorite books, played his favorite music. "You're going to be okay," she lied, because what else could she say? Freddie smiled. He knew she was lying. She knew he knew. It didn't matter. "Darling," he whispered, "I'm already okay. I made the music. That's all that matters. The music will go on." On the evening of November 23rd, Freddie released a public statement through his publicist, following enormous conjecture in the press. "I wish to confirm that I have been tested HIV positive and have AIDS. I felt it correct to keep this information private in order to protect the privacy of those around me. However, the time has now come for my friends and fans around the world to know the truth. I hope everyone will join with me, my doctors, and all those worldwide in the fight against this terrible disease." 24 hours later, at 7 p.m. on November 24th, 1991, Freddie Mercury died. Jim Hutton was holding his hand. Mary Austin was crying softly in the corner. The cats were curled on the bed. Somewhere in the house, Queen's music played quietly. Love of my life, Freddie's gift to Mary, his eternal statement of what mattered most. His last words, according to Jim, were heartbreakingly mundane. PP. He needed help to the bathroom. They helped him there and back. When they laid him in bed, Freddie closed his eyes. He never opened them again. The world stopped. MTV interrupted its programming to announce the death. Radio stations across the globe played Queen marathons, hours and hours of Freddie's voice filling the airwaves. Fans gathered outside Garden Lodge, leaving flowers and notes and candles until the gates looked like a shrine. The tributes poured in from presidents and rock stars and ordinary people whose lives had been touched by his music. But here's what nobody talks about. Here's the truth that will break your heart if you really understand it. Freddie Mercury's death changed everything. Before Freddie, AIDS was something people whispered about, a shameful secret, a gay disease, a thing that happened to other people, people on the margins, people who somehow deserved it through their lifestyle choices. After Freddie, it became impossible to ignore. The Freddie Mercury tribute concert in April 1992, held at Wembley Stadium, the same venue where Freddie had commanded 72,000 people just 7 years earlier, raised millions for AIDS research. It was broadcast to over 1 billion people worldwide. Princes and rock stars and actors stood on that stage and said the word AIDS out loud, without shame, without whispering. Elizabeth Taylor, who'd lost so many friends to the disease, said it best. Freddie's death made AIDS real to people who'd been ignoring it. They couldn't ignore it anymore because they loved his music. And if they loved his music, they had to think about how he died. And thinking about it, really thinking about it, that changes you. Research funding increased. Treatment improved. The stigma began, slowly, painfully, to lift. All because Freddie Mercury died, and the world finally paid attention. The real story of Freddie Mercury's AIDS, the truth that will break your heart, isn't just that he got sick and died. That's tragedy, yes, but it's not the whole truth. The truth is that he fought in silence for 4 years, creating art while his body betrayed him, protecting his legacy while preparing for death, living brilliantly even as he was dying. The truth is that he transformed personal tragedy into global change, that his death accomplished what his life couldn't, making people care about AIDS, making them see victims as human beings, as sons and partners and artists and legends. The truth is that Freddie Mercury, even in dying, refused to be anything less than himself, defiant, creative, unbreakable in spirit even when his body broke. Today, more than 30 years after his death, Freddie Mercury is more famous than ever. New generations discover Queen and fall in love with that impossible voice, that commanding presence, that pure, undiluted joy in performing. Bohemian Rhapsody has been streamed billions of times. His music fills stadiums, and movies and commercials and lives. When you hear Don't Stop Me Now, or We Are the Champions, or Somebody to Love, you're not hearing an AIDS victim. You're hearing a legend who refused to stop, who sang through the pain, who looked death in the eye and said, "Not yet, I have one more song." Freddie Mercury's AIDS story is tragic, undeniably, unbearably tragic, but it's also beautiful. It's a story about choosing how you'll be remembered, about fighting for your art until your last breath, about transforming personal suffering into something that helps others, about leaving the world better than you found it, even when the world treated you cruelly. The show did go on. His voice echoes in stadiums. His spirit lives in every person who faces darkness and chooses to keep creating, keep fighting, keep loving. His courage remains captured forever in those recordings. The sound of a man refusing to surrender to anything, including death. Every time that impossible note holds in The Show Must Go On. Remember what it cost him to sing it. Remember that he sang it anyway. Remember that he showed us what it means to be truly magnificently human. Remember Freddie.